Why is a taxi lap so expensive? How much do the brake pads cost and how long do the tires last? This and a lot more in today's video. How much does it cost to run a taxi on the Nürburgring?
That's a really good question. I mean, a lot of times, you know, we get a lot of messages, oh gosh, €299 for a lap in the 720S or in the 600 LT, or €269 in this M3. It's like people just get completely blown away. 600 LT, M3, 720S, 269. People say, I'll just drive a lap myself. We've even got comments, I'll just buy the car if I have to pay that much money. So, okay, well, I mean, if you look at this car right now, what we're gonna talk about today doesn't even include what this costs. Imagine what just the labor rates are to strip a car down this far with somebody that knows how to put it back together. You know,
absolutely. Putting a cage in, install 4 bucket seats in a safe and street legal manner.
Yeah, getting German TÜV approval, everything like that. That's a huge cost all on its own, which we won't even get into. It goes back to, we're going to talk right now about the costs. We're going to talk about running costs, brake costs, actually go down to some employee costs, and talk about what it takes to actually run a taxi from A to Z. And I think that people will get a better understanding of why does it actually cost $299 in the McLarens, why does it cost $269 in this, and why should it actually probably cost a little bit more money. But yeah, it's a very good question. It goes back, somebody actually asked this morning on your YouTube channel, if you're doing all of this work to the M3 and you're still charging the same, what point does it make? And the answer is it doesn't make a point. You know, we sold in this car, I think somewhere around 1,100 laps last year that we ran, and to be honest with you, we really couldn't do too many more. You know, there's times that we could have run more, but that's a lot of laps for a car. That really is a lot of laps for a car and a lot of laps for the team. Could we maybe get up to 1,500 laps? Well, I would love to. But this is the first season or the first series of taxi licenses with so much competition, so many people out there, and for us to be over 1,000 laps, I'm perfectly happy. You know, and so if we stick at that point, I'm happy. At this point now, we want to deliver the best product, even if it means we do a few less laps because we're going to be taking more time to put people in cars and things like that, but we just want to deliver the best product, and that's it. It's a sense of pride of having a very good product and something that at the end of the day, when we go through these numbers, you're going to see that the smart thing to do would be to buy a Porsche GT3 RS and run it with tires that go over 100 laps per set of tires, brake pads that go over well over 100 set of brakes, laps per set of brake pads and discs. But that's not what I want. That's not the car that I want to offer, that we want to put out there. We want to put out what we really enjoy.
Yep.
We'll also talk about what can we do better to reduce these costs, because there are a lot of things, partnerships, better part supplies, things like that we can do, that we will do next year to improve our costs. Okay? So, I mean, we can start off with we're looking at the M3, we're sitting in the M3, so why don't we start off with that car? When you're running a car like this, we're looking at loaded around 1,900 to 2,000 kilograms, okay? That's a 2-ton rolling package. Your typical race car doesn't come anywhere near that, okay? If you're running an M4 or M3 race car, you're probably in the 1,300 to 1,400 kilo range would be my guess. Then you add the driver in and you maybe have another 70 kilos. So you're in the 1,400 kilos. So we're running 500 to 600 kilos heavier than your typical race car would in this environment. Now, a race car needs to push a little bit harder to the limit, but I think that's more than compensated with 600 kilos in the car, okay? So things that we have to look at, front brake pads, front discs. All right, those are 2 big ticket items. On our front pads, on this car, we're getting about 60 laps per set of pads, okay? If you look at a set of pads being somewhere around €400, okay, with the pads that we're running, they're 25 millimeter thick pad, and you're getting around 50 to 60 laps per set, you're roughly looking at €6 per lap.
Again, we're talking about the Nürburgring Nordschleife with 21 kilometers or 13 or 14 miles, so not the casual GP track, which is like 6 times.
And then you have additional costs. So when I calculate the €6 per lap, I'm being generous, you have additional costs you have to think about. On a typical weekend, we've had days where this car has done 30 laps on a Saturday and 30 laps on a Sunday. That means we're going through an entire set of brake pads in 2 days. Well, let's say it does 20 laps per day, and then that means we only have 20 laps left. After a weekend, we've done 40 laps, we only have 20 laps left, so now we have to balance it out during the week. So we have labor costs. We need to take and run these pads on short days, you know, so weeknights, evenings where the track's only open for 2 hours, we need to put these pads back in. So we then have to actually calculate in additional labor costs for our mechanic to put these pads back in, stock them, inventory, we're not even gonna get into that, you know, storage space, etc. Okay? You have front discs. So last year we were running a version 2 disc, and that version 2 basically is a 2-piece disc that's all bolted together, okay? Every time we would buy new discs, all right, we would also have to include labor, the time to take apart the old disc, take out all of these bolts, put all the new bolts back in, and then mount it back on the car. So you had a lot of cost and time with that. So again, if you're looking at, depending on the disc and the setup, do you need a new hat? So we have to calculate in partially new hats as well, because those are a wear item at the end of the day. So you're looking at somewhere each time you swap the front discs around 14 to 1500 euro. Okay, so what are we getting out of a set of discs? On the version 2 disc, we're getting 80 laps. So think about that, 80 laps, and we're going through around 14 to 1500 euros. So we're looking between 17 and 20 euro per lap just on front discs, okay? So a lot of people bring their car to the Nürburgring to go out, do 10, 15, 20 laps in a weekend, and that's their month, right? We're doing that every day or more, right? And so we're really blowing through parts on that. We now have the new V3, the version 3 disc, which actually no longer uses the bolts, it uses rings, which holds the two pieces, the hat and the ring together, the brake material together, and that saves a lot of labor. So we're not having to buy the bobbin kit anymore, and we're just buying a cheap ring if we need to, okay? So again, now you're looking at 17 to 20 euro a lap just in front discs. We have rear brake pads. Luckily on these cars, the rear brakes get a little bit less wear and tear. So we're able to get 120 laps out of the rear brake pads, so that's nice. Rear discs, we're actually able to get 400 laps out of a rear disc, okay, but they're not cheap. So between, if you take our rear brake package, we're probably looking at somewhere between 5 and 7 euro per lap, depending on, why do I give a range? We've had weekends where we've had like, just, I don't know, it's like the rugby convention at Nürburgring, and you've got like these big dudes, you know, that are just, you know, bringing our total up to 2,200 kilos, and we're getting 40 laps out of a set of brakes. So we have an average, right? So that brings us down to an average. One thing, this car, again, we're going to continually talk about weight with this car, right? Drive shafts. Every 350 laps, we're changing out the rear drive shafts, left and right drive shaft, okay? If you've ever bought a drive shaft, you know that you're not going to do this car with drive shafts for less than 3,000 euro, okay? So every 350 laps, we're trading out.
For 3,000 euro.
For two, yeah, for the pair. Yeah, so 1,500 a piece is what you're going to do in best case scenario if everything goes well. And so we're looking at somewhere between 7 to 10 euro a lap, depending on if we have to do it earlier. So this is part of our regular maintenance, our regular checks. You rotate everything. Do you hear any noises? Is there any play? Is anything loose? Is grease coming out? And sometimes we've changed them earlier, sometimes later. A lot of people ask, why don't our taxis drive over the curbs? Well, a big one is drive shafts, right? We are always looking at taking care of our wheels, our tires, and our drive shafts by how we drive the car. With what we're doing, the car will not be any faster taking curbs. Okay, so it's just not necessary. Tires. Oh, actually, this is a really important one. I'll take a step back here. The rear hubs. So the rear hubs and the bearings on these cars, BMW went to try and go with a lighter weight build, and they made the material on the rear hubs thinner. Every 175 laps, we're doing a very thorough inspection and changing out the rear hubs. In parts, we're looking at roughly 1,000 euro plus labor. That's quite a job. You know, we have to do that every 175. That's just a safety thing, because the rear hub is essentially what holds your wheel on. You know, if that cracks off, you lose a wheel, right? So we're doing that, and that's unfortunately something that BMW has kind of put us in that position. The older cars weren't as lightweight. If you go like in the E92, it's a non-issue, okay? Tires, 80 laps on a set of tires, 1,000 euro. Okay, so we're looking at about 13 euro per set of per lap on a set of tires. Oil changes, okay? We've calculated about 2 euro per lap on oil changes.
That includes the engine and transmission oil?
No, that's just the engine. So it's 2 euro lap for the engine oil, and that includes the engine oil and the filter, and that's it, and the labor, obviously, okay? Then you have the gearbox oil. We calculate 3 euro per lap on that. We're changing the oil every maximum 120 on the engine and about every 175 on the differential. With the way that we use it, the oil gets hot and it breaks down quickly. If we go past 175 laps, you'll start to notice misshifts. The transmission will stick in a gear, maybe shift a little bit later and do things like that. So we need to really work on that. Brake bleeding. Brake bleeding is huge. That your pedal feel and everything is dictated simply by the brakes, okay? And the brake fluid essentially. And the hotter it gets, on a hot day with big loads and everything, you start degrading your brake fluid, 1 euro per lap, okay? So if you take all of this, right, you come up with a pretty substantial number, all right? There's fixed costs that we have. We have the cost of the car. So we also have upgrade costs. I'm not even gonna talk about upgrade costs. When we first got it, we did complete suspension, differential, all kinds of things that we did to this car to set it up. That was a large bill. Then now we're doing this cage and seats and harnesses and intercom systems, and you know, this is another huge bill, and I'm not even going to put this into this calculation because in one of the previous videos I'd mentioned that this is a car I see us keeping long term. So these are investment into an asset, if you would. So we're investing into the product. I calculate the cost on this car at around 20,000 a year. That's probably a pretty generous calculation, to be honest with you, because if you think that you're going to put over 20,000 kilometers on the Nürburgring, you're going to get more than 20,000 in depreciation. But we're also building a product that is going to be very sought after later on if we decide to sell it. But at the same time, this will go into the Apex M Series collection, if you would, once it's done. We have insurance costs for the year, well over 5,000 euro, okay, and that's just for basically a taxi type of insurance. Then we have miscellaneous repairs and updates, things that you don't expect, and you're not, that's going to happen. Yeah. When you're running wheels like a BBS E88 and your driver does take a curb, you're going to have some repair costs, if it gets cracked. And so things like that are just things that you have to think about over the course of a year. We've had to change out O2 sensors. We've had to work on injectors. We've had to do things like that. And no, we don't take the car in for warranty work. Everything that this car has, we take care of ourselves, and that's it. So if the motor blows up, we need to be ready to plunk down 15,000 euro to put a new motor in. So these are the things that we have to budget for in the future, okay? Then the big one that people don't really think about, employees, drivers, and the taxi license. It's not fair to the employees, the drivers, or anyone else who runs a taxi for me to tell you these exact prices, okay? But I can tell you that per car, I calculate 115,000 euro per year per car for these personnel and license costs, okay? So that gives you an idea. So if I take the car costs, the insurance, the miscellaneous repairs and updates, and the employees, license, and drivers, I'm at 160,000 euro per car before we even start the engine. Yeah. Okay? Fuel, 16 euro per lap in this car. Okay, so we're up 16 euro per lap. You can do this math and you can see that if our operating costs are around 75 a lap and then we have 160,000 in a fixed cost, that definitely adds up quickly. So if we do 1,000 laps and we have 160,000 in fixed costs and 75,000 in operating costs, right? We're at 225,000. If we book 269 a lap, we have a profit of 34,000 euro. Yeah. That's including tax. Well, you often see 15% discount, 10% discount, free laps. But the those 1,000 laps, that's why I'm counting it that way, because those are generally paid for laps. When we do discounts, it's usually for people who wouldn't otherwise come to the Nürburgring. It might be a giveaway, it might be a special promotion, it might be lap with Apex, it might be something like that. So it's part of a special promotion. So that's why we actually need to keep our pricing at 269 as much as possible. We've done days where we did rain laps and come out for 100 euro for the rain, but I can tell you that all of these wear and tear costs go down tremendously. And sometimes everyone just says, hey, let's go have a little fun, it's raining. And when you do that and there's literally 100 people at the Nürburgring and 15 people come out, those 15 people weren't going to be your customer to begin with, so you're promoting the company at that point, right? And that's just kind of one of the things that someone benefits from being there on that terrible weather days, right? So you can see that if we only do 700 laps, our fixed cost would still be 212,000 euro, but we would only bring in 188,000 for a loss of 24,000 euro. So you can see that we really need to get the lap count up in order to be profitable.
And again, you did not calculate the cost to modify this car.
We didn't calculate the cost to modify the car, and we have to look at that, like I said, as
investment
and having a car later on. You know what I mean? You look at our hotel, we did a lot of renovation to the hotel, and that's investment costs, right? That's something that at the end of it, so that's why we don't want to see this car crash, we don't want to see it damaged, we want to take good care of it, we want to have regular maintenance so that when it's done in taxi service, I can put my family in it. You know what I mean? Who knows what we're going to do? Maybe we put Max and Annalisa in it. Maybe this will be the car they both learn to drive on the Nordschleife. Who knows? You know what I mean? Mom and Dad in the back yelling at them. And so that gives you an idea. Now, we think that those costs seem high. We'll go to the McLaren. Okay, the McLaren. Some people are just going to jaw drop.